So I've lived in Medina County since 1976. My husband owned WDBN FM, which is a radio station that was assigned to Medina County, and he'd owned it since 1968. And it had offices in Cleveland, so he worked from Cleveland. But in 1970, and I actually started working at the station as well. So in 1976, gasoline prices were going up. I think they reached a high of like $1 a gallon or something, if you can imagine such a thing. And my husband said, we really need to move to Medina. We've been driving down there to work every single day from the east side of Cleveland, from Shaker Heights, where we live. And our son at the time was 4, and we thought, well, maybe it was a good time to get settled in a community. We sold the radio station in 1988. And at that time, I went to work briefly for a mortgage company as a PR director. I wasn't really keen on the job. I don't know why I did it, but I just sort of wanted, to get a job. And a friend of mine named Pat Boyle owned a shop in Medina called Gramercy Gallery. And she and her husband were about to move to England, and she was going to either close or sell the shop. And she told me, I'm not really sure what to do. I could only really sell it to the right person. And so I mentioned it to my husband. We both it's sort of like light bulbs went off, and I thought, this just sounds like the perfect thing. I had actually always loved that shop. I'd been a good customer of the shop. I loved the idea of being in the historic district of Medina. So in 1989, I bought the shop from Pat, and then had it for 23 years until I retired and closed it in 2013. I thought, well, the only way I'm ever going to meet anybody is to join some organization. So that's when I did, get a little bit more involved in the community. The first year that we lived in Medina, the schools closed early that year before the Christmas vacation. And at that time, the law in Ohio allowed schools to close if they didn't have enough money to operate. Well, that's really when both my husband and I first did get involved in in politics in Medina County, because we got involved in the school levy that then brought more money to the school so that they could continue to operate. But that was really a wake-up call, because I thought, I need to get involved. I can't let this happen. And it wasn't just, I didn't feel like I was the only one who could help it, but I thought I need to get involved and work with other people to make sure this doesn't ever happen again. I got more involved in different organizations. One of the early organizations that I belonged to was AAUW, American Association of University Women. And I think working in the school levies, it meant working in every school levy then for the next, I don't know how many years. So we worked on a lot of levies. And then I ended up working on other levies for other community organizations, the county parks. I was asked to co-chair that, and the parks had been trying for years to pass a levy, but there was so much open land still in Medina County at the time that people really weren't thinking parks. Thinking, well, I can look out at my 20 acres here. I don't need to really have a park. So I think it was the 10th try. Homer Smith and I were asked to co-chair that campaign committee, and we won the county park's first levy. And the same thing happened with the library. I was co-chair of the very first Medina County District Library levy that did pass. I ran for city council and served on Medina City Council for 13 years, 5 of those years as council president, and that was all while I was at Gramercy Gallery. So I had just gotten more involved in the city, and I'm not sure why. It just sort of happened. As soon as I knew I was that I was interested in running, I talked to everybody that I could in city government. The different department heads, to find out how they operated. What their relationships were within the city, that type of thing. I talked to community leaders, nonprofit leaders, just to get an idea of what they thought community concerns were. So, and then once I got on city council, then obviously I learned as I went along how council operates. And I mean, for me, it was always a learning experience, but I always liked the idea of studying something before I get involved in it, so I'm not going to something completely cold. As an adult, I finally somehow found my voice, I guess. It was sort of strange. But, you know, you're involved in Leadership Medina County, and I have to say I went through the second class in 1993, and that was such an eye-opening experience. I think that anybody who gets involved in Leadership Medina County is going to want to get involved more in the community. I thought I knew everything about the county at that point, and I learned so much and met so many different people, and it did actually open the door for me to get involved in things that I hadn't been involved with before, and to meet people that I never normally would have met. And so I think that Leadership Medina County can be a huge avenue to getting more people involved in the community. AAUW, the American Association of University Women, have been doing a project, a Black History Month program with the Second Baptist Church on Bronson Street in Medina for a number of years. And in 2015, I was on the committee for the program. We decided to do a program that year called Does Race Matter? And we had a panel discussion with 2 African American students from the high school, the city's mayor, the superintendent of schools at the time, and the only African American teacher in the entire Medina City school system of 7,000 students at that time. And it was a pretty good panel discussion. I can't say that the panel itself really raised any issues that caused concern, but there were so many people in the audience that night that talked about their own experiences in Medina County with regard to racial prejudice and other concerns. People talked about some of the problems from a socioeconomic standpoint, the fact that kids maybe weren't able to afford to participate in sports in the schools because you had to pay to play. And so there was just so much community discussion that the moderator of the program afterwards said, well, if anybody would like to continue this conversation, get in touch with Pam and Cornell. So amazingly, a month later, we had a dozen people who sat down together, and we started talking about what we could do to, with regard to racial relations in the community, socioeconomic relations, and the like. And we worked on a mission statement to embrace diversity culturally, socially in the community. We brought our mission statement to the schools and to Medina City Council, and got some publicity from that. And we then decided to ask Medina City Council to pass a resolution in support of diversity. And so they did pass a resolution that supported all the different classes of diversity. I think we would like to see that Medina County becomes a community that people want to come work in, and that even though our population is 95% white, that minorities are welcome here, that people of all cultures are welcome here. So I think it's our goal really is to try to help people break down the barriers that make it difficult for people to want to come here, whether it's to work or live. Well, I guess I would encourage women to get involved as much as they can, not to be afraid. To find, everybody needs a support group, and whether it's your family or your friends, try to find a way to allow yourself to get involved. I think we don't, when I look around, I don't see enough women in public office, for instance, and women need to. And I know it's difficult, when you're trying to raise a family and all of that, but they're just, I think that you can do it, and that women should find a way to do it by reaching out to sort of a larger family of people who can help you attain those goals, because there's no reason that women who are the major part of the population shouldn't have a larger share in leadership, whether it's political, business leadership, and I think certainly there are things in our society that make it difficult, childcare, things like that. Women really, even today, just bear too much of the burden of raising a family, and it makes it difficult, but I think you just need to just say, I'm going to do it, and do it. When people are, I think we've become more of a bedroom community and not so much of a community that's just about us. People don't work in the county necessarily. We don't have media that's as much just devoted to the county, so people are not necessarily following local news. Instead, they're watching national news. And I think that when you live in a community, it's really important to know your community, to know who your elected officials are, to know what happens in your city or county government, to know that it's not just the national government that has importance, but really everything happens. It starts locally, and if you're not paying attention to your local community, it's hard to understand how you can then really be paying attention to the bigger community around the world. And there's just so much. I think the other, to know what are the positives of the community. There are people who maybe never go to the square, or who never do anything in Medina County, but there's a lot going on in our county. And then you think of our county too as being part of this this really vibrant Northeast Ohio area, that there's no reason that people in Medina can't be just as involved with things in Cleveland or things in Akron and, across the borders. We don't need to isolate ourselves. So to me, I never would have thought that I would say this, but when I was growing up, or and now that I ended up in Ohio, for instance, I feel that we live in a really good area, and that Medina County and people in Medina County have opportunities that are just fabulous when you consider we've got the Cleveland Orchestra, we've got the museums, we've got just so much going on, and all of that is important to us here in Medina, and we need to make our voices in Medina known to the bigger area. Because everything that I've been involved in the community has been a way of saying I want our community to be a better community, whether it's with regard to historic preservation, the businesses we have, the healthcare that we have, the diversity and the acceptance. I've wanted to be involved in those things that I've seen as elevating our community. And at this point, I'm not sure, who knows, there might be something next week that someone will bring up and I'll say, oh yeah, I'll get involved in that. But at the moment, I don't think so.